What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Beat of KC. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Lucas Murphy, and today was a great day to be a Kansas City Chiefs fan. Absolutely no question. And the reason is because the Kansas City Chiefs literally put, and excuse my language, belt to ass to the Baltimore Ravens. And the reason I'm kind of got a little bit of arrogance to me is because across the NFL platform, whether it was social media, you were going on TikTok lives, there were people that obviously were participating in TikTok lives saying, hey, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to lose the Baltimore Ravens. If you went on X, if you went on social media, I'm going to turn my light on so I can really focus in here. If you went on X, social media, and you saw all these people jock riding the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson and all these things and how great he is. And yes, Lamar Jackson is a phenomenal quarterback, ladies and gentlemen. But the point that I'm getting at is the fact that people just seem to forget the run the Kansas City Chiefs have had and who their coach is, who their starting quarterback is, the weapons that they have when they're healthy, the defensive coordinator and his scheme and the plan that he can implement. Those were all put out there. And what I think I'm most excited about is the fact that as a Chiefs fan who enjoys talking about the Kansas City Chiefs through a platform like YouTube and X, I think the fact that I've continued to remain optimistic. I've continued to keep my excitement up for this Kansas City Chiefs football team. And that, to me, is what really is making me happy. I think for the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs implemented back into their offense a Ferrari, ladies and gentlemen, a Lamborghini. The Kansas City Chiefs add Xavier Worthy back to this roster, and he has an immediate impact. And I think that just shows you what is coming with Rashee Rice. My optimism has continued. I met with, obviously, Josh Fan. I met with Michael Darcy from KC Sports Report, Josh Fan from Show Me Football. One of the things that I continue to kind of bring to our discussion is continuing the optimism for this team. I believe that they truly had guys that they anticipated to have specific carved out roles within this offense. Then you had the injury on the third play of the very first game against the Chargers with Xavier Worthy. Blows up his shoulder. We knew coming into the season there was going to be a suspension. We finally get the suspension for Rashee Rice, and you immediately knew you were going to be without two of the most impactful weapons that this Kansas City Chiefs roster could have. And so I think that right there started forcing guys in this offense to take on roles that they just were not expected to have. And so you have to duct tape that together. Patrick Mahomes has to continue to build rapport with those guys in practice. Yes, that's what great quarterbacks do. And that's why we were obviously able to go out and defeat the New York Giants, who obviously are not up to the caliber. But then they turn around and defeat the Los Angeles Chargers today. So I think the excitement for me is that my optimism is paying off. You know, there's often times where it could flip. Your optimism, you can only have optimism so much, and then a team just lets you down. I've been there. I'm a Kansas City sports fan. The Royals, the early on of my existence, Kansas City Chiefs fandom, I would get let down. But that just doesn't exist right now with this Kansas City Chiefs football team. Yes, they have lulls. Yes, they're trying to figure things out. Yes, they're dealing with injuries. Yes. And I don't want to hear that excuse from the Baltimore Ravens. I don't want to hear that excuse from big heads covering on ESPN or on social media being like, oh, the Ravens had injuries. Guys, we had injuries. So what's the excuse? It's not an excuse. Lamar Jackson, 14 of 20, 147 yards. Averaged 7.4, threw a touchdown and an interception to an absolute beast in Leo Chenal. He was sacked multiple times. He had constant pressure the entire time he was on the field until he quit. Ladies and gentlemen, yeah, he can say he had a hamstring injury. He walked off the field. He quit. He quit. Derrick Henry, ladies and gentlemen, had 8 carries for 42 yards and only averaged 5.3 yards on a guy who has absolutely just gone off on every team that he's played so far. Granted, he held on to the football in this game, but the fact that Derrick Henry only rushed 8 times for 42 yards. This entire team only rushed 17 times, ladies and gentlemen. The Kansas City Chiefs absolutely just threw an onslaught of blitz packages from all different angles, from all different players. It was incredible. And so while we're on that, let's go ahead and look at that. So let's get these sacks up. George Karlaftis, sack. Jerry Tillery, sack. 2 sacks. One of the things that I really want to look at as stuff starts to kind of come out is the blitz rate in this game, the amount of pressure that was applied to Lamar Jackson, because, ladies and gentlemen, he was under pressure damn near every time he dropped back. I do believe that Spags was in his bag, and I tweeted out that Spags was in his bag because I'm pretty sure he probably went and watched extensively game film of the Lions and how they approached and how they addressed, the Baltimore Ravens game that they recently had. And I'm sure they've gone back and looked at film from prior years. We've actually held Derrick Henry in good standing multiple times. Now, has he had a few games? Yeah. But Spags figures out a way. You got guys like Nick Bolton. You got guys like Leo Chenal. You got guys like Drew Tranquill back there that are rotating spies that are able to come and provide different blitz packages. You got guys flying off the end. You got your D tackles. Work in the middle. This defense absolutely showed out, and I think it all came together as a culmination. It's something we've talked about multiple times throughout this entire stretch of games so far in this season. The fact that if you apply pressure to the opposing quarterback and you do not give them time to really function in their offense, that allows for good corners to lock down elite, talented wide receivers. And in some cases, it allows them to lock down tight ends. Mark Andrews, let's see what Mark Andrews. Let's go ahead and cover this wide receiver room, who only had 199 receiving yards. Zay Flowers, some of that came in junk time. 7 receptions for 74 yards. His long was 21 on 8 targets. Justice Hill, the backup running back, 5 receptions for 41 yards and a late touchdown on 6 targets. Mark Andrews, 7 for 30. That was a mix between Shamari Connor, Leo Chenal. 7 for 8 and had 30 yards and only averaged 4.3. Rashad Bateman, 1 deep ball for 24 yards on 2 targets. Derrick Henry caught 2 balls on 3 targets for 16 yards. Tylan Wallace, 1 for 14. And D-Hop, who looks like he had a performance similar to what he would do with the Kansas City Chiefs. I actually anticipated D-Hop to go off. I'm a big D-Hop fan. I really was disappointed that he went and chose to go to the Baltimore Ravens instead of trying to potentially work out a deal to come back to Kansas City. I understand it. You probably want to play with Lamar, but this is what happens. They're 1-3 on the season. They're 0-2 away. They're digging themselves a hole when it comes to seeding. The Pittsburgh Steelers, ladies and gentlemen, look pretty solid against the Minnesota Vikings today. The Cincinnati Bengals at some point are going to get Joe Burrow back. Now, are the Bengals relatively close to the Ravens? I don't think so. I still believe there's a lot left in the Baltimore Ravens. I have a lot of respect for the Baltimore Ravens. I respect Harbaugh. I respect the heck out of Lamar Jackson. Hell of a football player. A big fan of Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers. There's a lot of guys that I have respect for on this team. And so I'm not degrading the team. What I'm doing is the fact that this team was put on a pedestal, and they've not done anything to deserve to be put on that pedestal. This was a great football game. This started out to be a great football game for the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, it was. And we're going to do a lot of coverage during this week, really highlighting a lot of positivity from this offense. So we're going to talk again. Xavier Worthy, ladies and gentlemen, on the ground, had 2 carries for 38 yards, average 19. Something you were missing. We saw those end arounds. We saw those it was like a quick pitch in the backfield, and off he went. Average 19 yards. You were missing that. Tyquan Thornton, Nico Remigio, they were not filling that role. Xavier Worthy, 5 receptions on 8 targets. There were 2 deep balls that, to me, were on Mahomes. I think one, Xavier Worthy got bumped. Kind of slowed him up a bit. Mahomes had a decent placement. But again, you got to be able to hit that. It would have been a touchdown. But 5 for 83, averaging 16.6. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what you were missing. That frees up a guy like Travis Kelce, who then has 5 for 5 for 48, averaging 9.6. I mean, he's getting up there, ladies and gentlemen. He's not going to have those 100-yard games anymore. But a 5 for 5 for 48 and 9.6 is good. Hollywood Brown, 3 for 5, 38, averaging 12.7 and a touchdown. Hollywood Brown finding the end zone. One of the ones that most impressed me was Juju Smith-Schuster. He's kind of feeling a little bit of that Rashee Rice role right now. He's getting a little bit of those over-the-middle type catches, those crossing routes, those quick curl routes that turned into yak. He caught 4 balls on 6 targets for 36 yards, was targeted 9 times. Ladies and gentlemen, he found the end zone. Isaiah Pacheco definitely looked like he took a back seat there, I would say, in the second quarter. Bashard Smith was getting out there quite a bit. Kareem Hunt was getting out there quite a bit. I don't know if Pacheco was dealing with a little bit of injury. I don't know if he got the wind taken out of him, or if, there was a discussion. Hey, you're dropping down on the depth chart for a few plays. But he finally comes out, catches a ball, a little out route. Catches the ball, goes into the end zone. I mean, if that's what he provides, then let him provide that. Bashard Smith had some juice, though, ladies and gentlemen. We'll talk about that for sure during the week. And my guy that I'm really kind of gravitating towards, I really talked about him a lot in training camp, talked about him through the first few seasons or the first few games because he's just had phenomenal games, and that's Tyquan Thornton. Again, catches 1 ball on 2 targets, but one of those is a touchdown. It's crazy to see this offense when you're starting to get pieces back. Their roles are starting to get filled, and they know what to do. They know where to play. And now it's starting to click. It's starting to click. I think the fact that this is a big statement game. This is a statement game to me. And I'm sure some people are gonna gravitate towards the injury discussion. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, the Ravens were dealing with their defensive tackle front. They were dealing with some injuries. Kyle Van Noy didn't play. He was dealing with some injuries. So were the Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs did not use as... We talked about it. Did we make it as an excuse? I don't think so. I definitely don't think so, because you can't control injuries. It's part of the football game. This is a very physically contacted sport. That stuff happens. So it's next man up mentality. And Harbaugh said that at halftime, coming out of halftime. They interviewed him. And they said, hey, Roquan Smith dealing with an injury. This person dealing with an injury. What do you got to say for those injuries? Harbaugh's response, next man up. That is the mentality. That's why you build out your 53-man roster. And I think that's how the Chiefs have managed this. Yes, they started slow. They did not have a good game plan going into the first game against the Chargers. They anticipated Brother Harbaugh to have a game plan to run the football. That didn't work out. They threw the heck out of it. Herbert had a game. But could that have changed the dynamic? We were still in that game at the very end. If Xavier Worthy does not go out in the third play of that game, are the Kansas City Chiefs losing that football game? I don't think so. I don't think so. Now the Philadelphia Eagles, they come to Kansas City. Does Xavier Worthy change the dynamic of the offense enough? I don't know. I think they still potentially take the L against the Eagles. The tush push was hard to prevent. And I don't want to dive into that too much. That's an elite play that those guys have perfected. But you go to the Giants. With that Giants game, the first half, really that first quarter, had looked like a JV football game if Xavier Worthy was out there. I don't think so. Then you get Xavier Worthy back, and look what happens. This team absolutely goes off. This team absolutely goes off. It's impressive to me. And I think, too, like, that's the thing that I'm most excited about is the optimism, the fact that I maintain that through the tough times, because this team will endure adversity. They endured it. They went through adversity. They experienced it in these first few games. And I think what's unique, too, is now you're almost staging yourself to really kind of start making that push. You're 2-2. You're getting ready to play a Jacksonville Jaguars team that is nowhere close, in my opinion, to the Baltimore Ravens. That's going to set you up to go play the Detroit Lions. And so I truly believe that this is a perfect scenario right now that is lining up for this Kansas City Chiefs offense and this defense and this coaching staff. It's perfect. Thank you. One of the things I kind of want to look at, too, is on the defensive side for Baltimore. Kyle Hamilton really kind of led the team in total tackles. Marlon Humphrey was all over this field. Odafe Uwe played a heck of a football game. But there's a lot of guys on here that are new to this team or are filling in spots. They're filling in roles. There were a few QB hits. Tavius Robinson had a sack. That was it. And I think where I'm going with this is that speaks to where this offensive line was at. Now, was our offensive line beat in a few scenarios? Yes. But one of the things that I feel that I noticed throughout this football game was the fact that Patrick Mahomes did not feel like he was running for his life when he didn't have to. There were times where Patrick Mahomes was able to sit in the pocket, go through his progressions, identify if guys were covered, and then he could run. It wasn't to the fact that as soon as Patrick Mahomes snaps the ball, he looks at his first read, maybe his second read, realizes that this entire offensive line is getting blown up. I got to make a move. I got to go run. That did not happen in this game. And granted, we knew coming into this game we were dealing with a very down defensive team. This defensive team is just not good so far. And I think the Baltimore Ravens fans are going to be experiencing a little bit of what we experienced as Kansas City Chiefs fans the first year to 2 years of Patrick Mahomes' career. And that's the fact that you would have an offense that almost felt like it could score at any time, but you had literally a bleeding just deficit of a defense that just may be able to apply pressure, may be able to sack the quarterback, but you had absolutely nobody covering. Nobody. And so they could take advantage of that. But now, you're starting to see this defense click. You're starting to see this defense come together. You're starting to see guys fill their roles, which is what I'm going to talk about a lot as we continue to go through this week. Guys are starting to identify their roles. They know what to expect. When they step on that football field, when they cross over those white lines, what is my job? That's just like us. We go to our job on a daily basis. And when you go to your job, you have a job description. You know your day-to-day task. You know what you have to complete in order to get your job done so you can punch that clock and go home. And just imagine if you go out to your job, you were never given a description. You show up to your cubicle, you sit down, or some of us, blue collar, we go out, we're working in all kinds of different things. And you go out and you're expected to work on a machine, but you have no experience with that machine. You have absolutely no instruction from anybody. And I think that's kind of where the Kansas City Chiefs were. That's my reference to the Kansas City Chiefs defense. And really that's the reference to the offense. When they first started, they didn't have the playbook, the game plan. They're trying to figure out where do guys need to be. They're seeing them in full pads. They're seeing them in live action. Granted, that's what the preseason's for, but at the same time, you're not getting a full 4 quarters of what a true NFL game is about. You got guys like Noel Williams who are stepping up. I'm actually kind of curious. Let me see if I can find that. Noel Williams. There he is. 3 tackles. Looks like he had a pass deflection. Jaden Hicks. I saw him flying around. This defense really, to me, had it game planned to the T today. They knew exactly who was going to be the QB spy. At times you could tell it was Bolton. At times you could tell it was Leo. Drew Tranquill was flying around. Drew Tranquill led the team in tackles. Shamari Connor is starting to fill that role. He's not having to play slot corner as much because you're finding guys who are able to play on the outside. McDuffie's able to slide back into the slot where was a first-team All-Pro. And you're able to put Shamari Connor in a role that he can excel at. That's what I'm talking about. You're getting a guy like Chris Roland Wallace who's coming out, stepping up in a big way. You're getting a group like Brian Cook and Jaden Hicks who are starting to build cohesion in the back parts of your defense. They're starting to play well. They're starting to communicate. This defense is only going to continue to get better as they continue to play better competition, and I think that's going to be a key thing. The fact that you were able to go against a Baltimore Ravens team, and if we're being honest, that 7 points that you're seeing there in the fourth quarter, you can almost take that off because it was just garbage time. So technically, we gave up 16 points to one of the most explosive offenses in the NFL. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, you can't ask for a better game. I mean, I guess you could in some areas if you really want to be nitpicky. One of the things that I was kind of nitpicky on is I've noticed a few times where Travis Kelce's kind of carrying the football, similar to how LaShawn McCoy used to carry the football, instead of having it tucked in and, bracing for impact, he's kind of waving it around. Tuck that thing in, Kelce, because someone who's got a good punch is going to knock that thing out. So I really think that there are a lot of things that this team is doing in a positive way. I'm excited to make videos this week, ladies and gentlemen. I'm excited to cover the Kansas City Chiefs. This is one of the most fun football games I can say I've been a part of. As a fan base, as someone who covers the Kansas City Chiefs in this format, it's nice to not sweat one out for once. It's nice to not have to worry about it coming down to the last possession and Mahomes pulling out Mahomes magic. It's nice to the fact that we actually blew out a team of this caliber and we're sending statements. Before we wrap this live up, I'm going to kind of go through and really kind of look at the full scoreboard for you all. Kind of talk about what we witnessed today in the league. Because I think that's something that we really should kind of identify. We're seeing Chicago beat the Raiders 25-24. I spoke earlier and really talked about the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers went over to Ireland and pulled one out against the Minnesota Vikings. They're having some
What drives
Let's
us?
mute that for you all, because that's kind of crazy.
We're here for one simple reason.
There we go. So we can see the Packers and the Cowboys will be playing here in a little bit, 7:20 Central Standard Time. So we're getting pretty close to that game. I think it's going to be a heck of a football game. Like I stated earlier, very early in the morning, the Pittsburgh Steelers defeated the Minnesota Vikings 24-21. They moved to 3-1 on the season. We're going to have to look at the standings just 4 games in. The Falcons pulling out against the Commanders. That's a pretty big win for the Falcons. They moved to 2-2 on the year, and the Commanders dropped to 2-2. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, do we expect the Buffalo Bills to lose to the Saints at home? I definitely didn't think so. Although they did find a way to put up 19 points, the Buffalo Bills steamrolled the New Orleans Saints. And Buffalo, obviously 4-0, 3-0 at home. They have a significant home field advantage. But it's going to be interesting to see, will they be challenged at all through this season? The Lions absolutely manhandle the Browns. And the Detroit Lions will be playing the Kansas City Chiefs in 2 weeks. As we see, Amon St. Brown, 7 receptions for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. Gibbs, again, on the ground, 15 carries, 91 yards and a touchdown. I do not believe, it looks like Joe Flacco actually was the better passer on the day. So, boy, the Patriots absolutely just waxed the Panthers 42-13. Interesting, the Patriots are 2-2 on the year. Not that I think that the Patriots are going to come out and make a run for the playoffs, but I mean, they're in a good spot right now. They're in a very tough division, obviously, with the Bills. The Chargers get defeated by the New York Giants, who moved to 1-3, led by Jackson Dart. I'm sure that fan base is just injected with excitement. Russell Wilson finds his way to the bench. Jackson Dart comes out, has a football game, ladies and gentlemen, has a football game and leads them to a victory against a team that a lot of people picked in the top 5. The Eagles find a way to defeat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa Bay, 31-25. It was a pretty close game. The Eagles 4-0. And the Texans hold the Titans 26-0. They give up 0 points. That's a pretty bold statement for a team that was on the cusp of going 0-4. Good to see the Texans fighting back in that division. The Colts in that same division take a loss to the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams are playing good football, ladies and gentlemen. The Rams are playing good football. They could easily be 4-0 right now, and the Eagles could be 3-1. And the reason is because the Rams literally, it came down to a blocked field goal last week. This Rams team is finding ways. The Jaguars edge out a victory over the 49ers. So they're 3-1. You know, it looks like Trevor Lawrence, ETN has been an absolute game changer for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Today he had 19 carries, 124 yards, and a touchdown. McCaffrey had 6 receptions for 92 yards and a touchdown. As the 49ers welcome back Brock Purdy, who went 22 of 38 for 309 and 2 touchdowns. So it'll be interesting to see how they do. And then, ladies and gentlemen, the Kansas City Chiefs absolutely poured it on, which we covered extensively in this live, 37-20, as they move to 2-2, and the Baltimore Ravens fall to 1-3. It's going to be interesting to see how that division shapes up and how seeding starts to play out for a team like the Baltimore Ravens. And then the Raiders fall to 1-3. You know, we got Monday Night Football, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be interesting to see because you got 2 0-3 teams going battling it out, which that game to me is going to be abysmal. But then you got the Bengals and the Broncos. The Broncos are currently 1-2. Everybody in the mainstream media were absolutely jock riding the Broncos as well. Bo Nix. Bo Nix is the next truth, ladies and gentlemen. 5 touchdowns to 3 interceptions for 535 yards on the year. Just really hasn't been that dude. And obviously the Bengals sustained an injury at the most important position on the field, and that is quarterback, with Joe Burrow being out for a while. So is Jake Browning going to be able to manage the Broncos defense that absolutely just swarms people? I don't think so. So we might see 2-2 teams. So just interesting how this AFC is starting to shape up, ladies and gentlemen. And the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs are now back to 2-2 on the year. It's as Pat McAfee said, the Chiefs are going to be Chiefs. And I do agree. And as Mitch Holtis said, you can doubt the Chiefs, you can hate the Chiefs. You're going to have to deal with the Chiefs. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you checking out this live. If you guys enjoy these live streams, make sure you let me know down in the comment section. Let me know what you think. And I appreciate everybody coming by and checking out this video. Appreciate all the support as always. Make sure you guys smash that subscribe button. Smash that like button. Follow me over on Twitter. It means the world to me. It really does. And I appreciate all the support. Make sure you all have a good rest of your evening. Enjoy some more football. And I end every video the exact same way. Have a good day.